Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for a conversation with Her Excellency Ambassador Ina Krishnamurthi, who has very kindly given us her time to be with us this afternoon and to talk about a range of issues, which I hope we can, given the limited time that we have. It has been from Indonesia to India, it has been an interesting journey of the G20, the global state of multilateralism, and the global order. India and Indonesia, again, two very important powers trying to also recalibrate their foreign policies in a world changing very fast. We also have had extreme turbulence in the Indo-Pacific, outside the Indo-Pacific, and as countries, responsible stakeholders in the international community, both India and Indonesia have been looking at this turbulence through their own lenses and trying to calibrate their foreign policies. So overall, Indonesia as an emerging power in the Indo-Pacific, as a country that wants to also shape the global order, we are very fortunate to have with us this afternoon Ambassador herself. She will be exploring some of these themes in her opening remarks, and then we will open this up for a conversation broadly with all of you as we take your questions, comments, observations. So again, thank you for joining us, and Ambassador, over to you for your initial remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Pant. Truly a pleasure for me to share some thoughts with all of you. Interestingly, I just want to start. If I go to public speaking event or wherever, never ever the OC put my middle name. So it's very interesting. And you put it right. So that's very interesting because this is also Sanskrit. Because Agni is Agni, you know, Agni, and my last name also Sanskrit. So that also can be a story to tell in speaking event. Usually I share the background of even my name. So that shows how close we are between Indonesia and India. So good afternoon, everyone. The moderator already mentioned about the year 22-23, remarkable period for India and Indonesia. He mentioned already about one of the most important landmarks in our relations. We swapped the presidencies, we become Troika, and even this year, India mentioned about the 4 golden years of G20, so we are part of it. And this is not a complaint. My 2-year in India, posting in India has become very colorful because it's not only about the bilateral, but how G20 manage the global issues. Last year, our presidency was marked by diverse, complicated global challenges caused by the war between Russia and Ukraine, and also at the same time, G20 talks about post-pandemic economic recovery. And this year, when India took over the presidency, as a result of global warming, the anomaly of El Nino set new heat records in many parts of the world, including Indonesia. It's very anomaly that now already end of November, but we haven't seen any rain in Indonesia. Then this caused far-reaching repercussions on health, on food security, water management, and also environment. And who can predict the escalation of conflict in Gaza? So political polarization has deepened far from the conflict. The global economy, including oil and food prices, face tougher disruption. Even the World Bank in its latest report outlines that the latest conflict in the Middle East comes on the heels of the biggest shock to commodity markets since the 70s. It continues on by saying that countries need to be vigilant. If the conflict were to escalate, the global economy would face a dual energy shock for the first time in decades, not just from the war in Europe, but also the war in Middle East. Let me now jump to what I want to. When I was asked by ORF, I was like wondering what should I talk about, and I decided to talk about the 75 years of bilateral relations, as next year we enter the 75 years of diplomatic relations. And for talking about Indonesia-India relations, we need to understand the at least a bit on the dynamics in both countries, in Indonesia and in India. And I'm sure I will learn much more from you about what India has achieved thus far. So I just want to focus more on Indonesia. Let me start with the most current, which is our chairmanship in ASEAN. Our ASEAN chairmanship has also marked an important period in ASEAN-India partnership. Post 30 years of anniversary celebration last year, this year we begin the journey of comprehensive strategic partnership by agreeing to implement the plan of action during the latest ASEAN-India summit. And you all know the gracious presence of Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the summit of ASEAN India and also East Asia Summit in Jakarta in the midst of G20 summit preparation is truly commendable. Not only as a political statement of the importance of ASEAN and East Asia Summit to or in India's foreign policy, but India, if you see the summit itself, especially the East Asia Summit, India has become a significant balancing voice in the Indo-Pacific region. And at the summit, my president emphasized that ASEAN and India need to see the Indian Ocean as sea of cooperation rather than a sea of confrontation. As he pointed out, that Indian Ocean connects 33 countries with 2.9 billion people, which is projected to be 1/5 of the world GDP in 2025. So, strangely, as a response, the Prime Minister presented 12 points, which some may see as a vision, but also at the same time missions for a more advanced future between two sides as we enter the fourth decade of partnership. Sharing my thoughts on India and Indonesia bilateral relation, maybe I should also share with you my personal experience when I arrived in Delhi January last year. Like anyone else who only has a very skin deep knowledge about Indonesia and India relationship, I started learning from history. Mahabharata, Ramayana, our fight for independence, India's vaccine and pharma diplomacy, because we received from you the help during the COVID and so forth. So, but however little did I know, apparently the relationship between our two nations is even deeper than only about the past. Our bilateral relationship has evolved from friends fighting the colonial power to being partnership in the post-colonial war, post-colonial order, and to becoming drivers of Asian centuries, focus on the Indo-Pacific region. You also know that India support the ASEAN Indo-Pacific outlook, for example. So as we enter 75 years of anniversary of our diplomatic relations, we need to reflect on what we have achieved and what must be done going forward. I think the strong socio-cultural linkages somewhat makes us content and sometimes ignored about the future and also the present. We just mesmerizing about the past too much and not building the foundation from that strong relations. So the most important thing I think is to build bridges between the past, present, and future. And what we all know, Indonesia and India have many shared values. One value, that is democracy, is right in the corner for India and Indonesia, which is national elections. Similar with India, Indonesia is also a vibrant democracy. Demonstration always happen anywhere, anytime in the capital or in any other cities in the country. We have 5-year national elections, and next year it would be an interesting period for our democratic process, because for the first time in our history, Indonesia will have what we call pemilu serentak, the unified elections on 14 February for president, vice president, and members of all local parliaments. When I say all, that means 38 provincial and 506 cities and regencies. So can you imagine? It's going to be an effort that it's very historical for us. At the same time, if you ask me whether I'm concerned, yes, of course I'm concerned, because we are the biggest archipelagic nation, and it's not easy to organize such a big elections at the all level until locals. When we talk about Indonesia and India, sometimes or a lot of times maybe, but I sometimes reluctant to say this one document. Why reluctant? Because so many critics say that the document is only paper, merely a paper that no one reads. It's called 2018 Strategic Comprehensive Partnership Agreement. But to understand the substance of this agreement, people needs to, I think, start from what is apparent in front of our eyes. That in the context of geography, Indonesia and India are positioned at critical crossroads in the Indo-Pacific. So the southernmost point of India's Andaman Nicobar Islands, located at the geostrategic juncture between South and Southeast Asia, lies just 90 nautical miles from Indonesia. This crucial intersection is also home to vital sea lines of communication and maritime choke points that serve as the economic lifeline of the region. And whereas Indonesia, we are located between two oceans and two continents, which is Australia and Asia. So being significant maritime powers, Indonesia and India therefore can be considered as de facto gatekeepers of the region, which is a transit point for an estimated 60% of global maritime trade. But unfortunately, if we talk numbers, the relationship between Indonesia and India needs to be much further developed and much further deepened. Although we have combined GDP of 4.2 trillion US dollars, total population of 1.7 billion, Our trade figure in 22 only reached 32.71 billion US dollars. Our investment in India for the last 3 years, it is increasing 650.82 million US dollars. And Indian investment in Indonesia reached more than 820 million US dollars. So I think we need to find out why, although we are located in very significant, important, geographically speaking, our relationship cannot be as robust as we want. What happened actually? So on the other hand, during my post here for 2 years, if you remember, in 2018, we have signed an agreement called Defense Cooperation in 2018. We have implemented with regular talks in all level of Army, Air Force, Navy. We also collaborating in maintaining peace and stability through port visits, exercises, courses and training, even for female military officers. Even the last initiative that we initiate is the joint ocean debris cleaning by our Navy ships and also Coast Guards. And in 2 years, the embassy really want to have the direct connectivity, because in the past we don't have direct connectivity. Now we have 3, at least: Mumbai, Chennai, and 1st of December, Vistara will fly to Bali. And so please go to Bali. So before I close my remarks, very short, because I know it's more interesting to have a chat. I believe that there are so many potential, like I said, and many room to explore. But I think what I learned 2 years, the key is trust. Because without trust, we cannot build strategic trust. And as my president said, it is important to see the Indian Ocean as a sea of collaboration and not the sea of confrontation. Thank you so much, Mr. Pant.
Ambassador, I think you delved on a range of issues which some of us would like to unpack over the next half an hour or so that we have. I thought it might be just useful because you touched upon your elections, and we also have our elections next year. So it's pretty mammoth exercise, whichever way you look at it, from your angle or from our perspective. I was wondering if, whenever there are elections, one question that is often asked is, will we see how much change or continuity can we expect in the Indonesian foreign policy? Are you in any position to answer that question as of yet? Do you know what are the important debates happening in Indonesian domestic politics with regard to foreign policy, and is it likely that you might see a significant change? Because foreign policies generally don't change very much with changing governments. But certainly, I think as an important partner of Indonesia, many in India would also be looking at the domestic political process there and would be looking at the domestic debates on foreign policy. So any sort of remarks that you may make would be very useful, I think, for some of us here.
Yes. So I think I have no authority for talking about the next, but I think it is important to talk about future while we learn from the past. I've been a diplomat for 30 years. I've been 2 times ambassadors with, for sure, understanding that I was junior before, and now I'm an ambassador with a very solid and firm position that I can say throughout my 30 years of career, we never changed our foreign policy, which is free and active. foreign policy. The way to look at it may be different because, for example, we have during Joko Widodo cabinet, Ibu Retno, our foreign minister, also stays for 10 years. Even during current foreign minister, we changed the priorities because the global dynamics request or push us to change. Like, for example, in 2019, for example, 2019, our foreign policy, the first thing we say, citizens protection. But then COVID happened and we put economy and health as our priority. But the main idea concept is still the same, which is free and active foreign policy. Priority may be different, but I can assure you, because like I said, back then I was junior and now ambassador, no change at all about the active and free foreign policy. And we are also still maintaining our positions on many issues, including Palestine, G20, APEC, many ASEAN. So I don't see that there is much of the difference throughout the history of our foreign minister, but maybe the priority of foreign policy itself may be different. And secondly, this time around, it's the first time ever in our history of election, CSIS, one of the biggest think tank of Indonesia, did a kind of a presentation from each candidate of the president to give exposure on the idea of foreign policy. It's the first time ever that they need to give exposure. What is your foreign policy will be? And from what I've seen, there is no change, big change or significant change from the three candidates.
Thank you, Ambassador. One another aspect which I think many in India or many in this part of the world have been observing and would be very keen to have your views on would be the role of ASEAN. ASEAN sits at the heart of India's Indo-Pacific policy. ASEAN centrality is something that Indian policymakers believe in, they have invested in, and they have enshrined that as one of the very significant or central aspect of India's Indo-Pacific outreach. Now, when you look as a member of ASEAN and as a very critical member of ASEAN, when you look at the role that ASEAN is playing, there are some concerns about the divisions within ASEAN on certain critical issues. Mm-hmm. Do you see those divisions as hampering the role that ASEAN is playing, or do you view that as something that is par for the course in any organization like ASEAN, which has many members, which conflicting interests and ideas about where the region should be going?
I can share you some example of how differences in ASEAN makes us stronger in a way. If you know ASEAN, you must know that we uphold the principle of consensus, non-intervention. You never, never involve in domestic issues, yada yada. But when it comes to behind the story of any documents of ASEAN, the way we reach consensus is not like merely niceties. It's a fight behind the story. So it shows that the differences make us stronger rather than weaken us. Because if people see our differences make us weak, I think that's wrong. I don't see it that way, because if we are too different, then there won't be any agreements in the ASEAN. There won't be any consensus at all. But so far, ASEAN managed to find a consensus in a very difficult issues, including Myanmar issues, Palestine issues, North Korean issues, many sensitive, politically, substantively difficult issues. So if you say that the differences, how should I say, hampering us to get together and talk, it's not, because in our foreign policy, me as foreign service, always when you enter any country, first thing to do, see whether you have ASEAN family in that country. Second, if you have problems understanding the issue, you go to your family, which is ASEAN family. So I see that the differences and non-intervention makes us stronger rather than weaken us.
Sir, one of the problems I think many of the countries in the world today are facing is this structural problem, right? We have the US-China contestation or competition, whichever way you want to put it, is becoming sharper, is becoming starker, despite the recent summit between the Chinese president and the US president. The fault lines seem to be getting sharper by the day. Now, as a country that has traditionally navigated this very effectively, and also in terms of ideas, there has been this dynamic of non-alignment also present and as you mentioned, free and independent foreign policy, very strong undercurrent of that. How do you see Indonesia navigating this balance? Because clearly the stakes from the Cold War days have changed. Now you have very strong relationship with China on economic matters and a strong partnership with the US and the West on other aspects. So how effective that how effectively this can be transitioned given the complexities of today? Or is this a genuine concern at the moment, or is it something that past experience helps you to guide and to navigate easily?
Question is simple, but the answer is quite challenging for me. How to explain the way I want to explain. So I think maintaining balance now becoming more difficult. The reason why I said that, because all issues, current issues that do not live in a vacuum. Early days of me being diplomat, it's so easy to say this is only citizen protection and this is economy. Separation is there, but now you cannot say. Between issues, there are cross-cut that sometimes it's very confusing. So maintaining balance is not as easy as before. And on top of it, we have social media that also very much drive the issue, and maybe in a manner that policy makers cannot control. So maintaining balance for Indonesia in foreign policy, of course, is very difficult and challenging. When you think about geographically speaking, Indonesia located between, we are like a sandwich kind of thing, right? Between two oceans, between two continents. So it is not easy. And I remember February, one day before Ukraine has triggered the war, the day before, my minister blast a WhatsApp to all G20 ambassadors saying that, okay, invitation already sent, this is our priority. That evening, it happened somewhere in Ukraine. Who can predict that? So I think what you mentioned about structural problems, consultation, I think foreign policy since the beginning of time is about consultation. But currently the consultations becomes very difficult to manage by anyone. Unpredictable, very complicated, involve all actors, including social media. Social media is a machine, not a person. So I think that's it's difficult, and maintaining balance is difficult, and it shows how low the expectation of us in G20 last year. I remember Sidan asked this question last year, Excellency, will there be family photo? It's a very simple question, but to answer it is difficult. How? Why? It's to maintain the balance. Same like why we are seriously thankful for Prime Minister Modi to come to East Asia Summit. The behind the scene effort to ensure that visit happen, that's a lot of effort. What for? Maintaining the balance. So maintaining balance in foreign policy becomes very complicated now. Not only the issues, not only the stakeholders, but also what drive us to implement the foreign policy is also changed.
Before I open this up, you mentioned something very interesting. You said there is often you mentioned, I think, romanticization of the
Yes.
past. There's, that we are too focused on the past. And I think I would very much agree with that. But I was wondering, where do you think emphasis should be when we are looking at the future? What areas, for example, during your term here as the ambassador, you have prioritized, or the two governments have prioritized, to make it more than just a remembrance of the past and to make it a relationship that can respond to 21st century challenges?
For 2 years, I've been doing only. This is what I learned from a very good friend and a guru. India is very big, too big for you. Please don't be a superhero. Try to meddle on everything else detail. You need to focus. And then from day one, I jolt things that I think, from my learning, from my readings, from meeting people. That is why last year I focused on 3. First is connectivity, happened today. The direct connectivity. Second is the defense, because during COVID, after 2018, there is nothing in 2019. And my Minister of Defense come during Delta because he needs to negotiate for the vaccine. So he came 2020. So after that, nothing for the defense agreement to be implemented. So second, I focus on the defense, how to generate the training, the courses, the Navy talk, Army talk, whatever. And third issue is economy, which is trade and investment. That was 22, and at the same time, G20 is also on my plate. 23, my focus number 1 is G20, because our leaders, both Indonesia and India, agreed that there's need to be a continuity in substance, a continuity in voice of the South, and continuity in the policy of G20. So my focus 23 is G20, and number 2 still economy, but I moved to pharma, and number 3 digital, and hopefully UPI after Singapore we are also in the. So let's see what it's on my plate in 24. Maybe from here I can just tap your idea and views on what should be done by Indonesia and India next year. Thank you.
Thank you. So here's a chance for you all to shape the trajectory of India-Indonesia relationship. I open this up for your questions, comments, and observations. Yes, let's go ahead.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. I'm AJ Saha, intern ORF. My first question is regarding, as you mentioned, the distance between Banda Aceh province and Great Nicobar is just 80 nautical miles that make Indonesia closest maritime neighbor. But we haven't kind of realized its potential. But a few years back, Indian government came up with a master plan to develop Great Nicobar along the lines of Singapore as a maritime port township. Do you think that once that plan becomes a reality and Great Nicobar is actually developed as a port township, it can emerge as India's maritime gateway to not only Indonesia but also Southeast Asia? Second question is slightly ecological. Indonesia world's most biodiverse country. India has its own set of biodiversity. You have the Bengal tigers, you have the Sumatran tigers. So Prime Minister Modi launched the International Big Cat Alliance in February. International Big Cat Alliance in February. So we have the Project Tiger, which is a global success story when it comes to conservation. But the Sumatran tigers are facing extinction in Indonesia. So do you think that ecology can be the new avenue of deep cooperation between India and Indonesia? Thank you.
One by one. Aceh Andaman Master Plans, yes, we very thankful to India and for your info since today we also receive a delegation. So since 2 weeks ago, I think, until March, there is a program by Indian government to bring Aceh government official coming to India to learn more about India. Like I said, trust is very important so that the strategic thrust is there. Because without any confidence and trust, this will not happen. And why I said that, in particular Andaman and Nicobar, it's so, is this the right word if I say virgin? So it's so virgin in a sense of idea, in initiative, it becomes very difficult to be implemented. So the trust need to be there so that the strategic thrust is there. If not, then it will create a project on only merely a paper. The distance, yes, I agree. But when you talk about Aceh, you need to also talk with Singapore. You need to also talk with Malaysia, because that area of Malacca Strait, it's owns by the three countries. So it's not, again, like I said, strategic thrust needs confidence. Ecology, yes. My vision, I think what I want is orangutan coming to India, because orangutan is one of the biodiversity that only Indonesia owns. I want to have orangutan here, at least male and female, but it's not easy to ensure the zoo, which park or zoo that can accommodate orangutan, because orangutan is not, the ecological being is a bit different. Please wish me luck in bringing orangutan here. Not the tiger. The tiger, I believe it will be difficult for us to bring Sumatra or Java. Another thing that I'm thinking about, and also in line with what India has also over and over again mentioned to Indonesia, is about mangrove. We need to learn about mangrove from each other, because I believe in Mumbai there is one company that has 20-something hectares of mangrove since the 80s. In Bali, our president showed to the leaders our mangrove, how we kind of make sure that the mangrove can stop tsunami in Bali. It happened, I think, 2 times already, 3 times already, that the mangrove helps the communities when there is a tsunami happening. Thank you for the question. Maybe Sidan should not be given the floor.
Yes, he always grabs the floor. Privileges.
Perhaps India and Indonesia can ramp up trade cooperation, expand trade, and also on, what more could be done on the India-ASEAN. We already have an FTA on the goods agreement, which is bound for a review by the end of 2025. Would you like to comment on that?
It's always difficult when we talk about FTA. Any ambassadors is always difficult because FTA is seen as a way to go for trade relation, but at the same time, negotiating trade agreement is never ever easy. It will involve a lot of energy and time to negotiate. For the review, yes, I do believe it's already on the table for Indonesia. Because like I said, we had the FTA a long time back, but at that time there's should I say this? Not an incident, but an event where Indonesia is focusing on RCEP, RCEP. India doesn't want RCEP, so that creates another issue of confidence and trust, like I said. So maybe FTA review, yes, but I think the most important thing to give strong foundation for any negotiation is trust and confidence. Trade potentials untapped, I think I should say like this. In all relationship between emerging economies, one of the biggest challenge is not our differences, but our similarities. So that is why the untapped potentials, we need to focus on what is or are different between Indonesia and India, so that we can make use of the room to wiggle. Until now, I just mentioned about pharma. That is another potential that we cannot do it. We don't have the technology and expertise. India has it abundantly. What we have is, for example, the palm oil, for example, and also the products derivative out of it. Maybe we can have, or maybe we can make use of that added value, or maybe we can focus on, like for example, the connectivity. I will tell you about connectivity. My fight to get direct connectivity, it's not about the plane. It's about to get the traffic from here to there, from there to here. So the loads needs to be there constantly and continuously. So before making the direct connectivity, which happens this year, last year I do sister hospital, I do sister university, U2U, exchange of students, exchange to create traffics. Same like trade. It's not about the trade itself, but how to understand what we have, what India doesn't have, what India has, but until now that is not, so that is the issue that we still lacking of understanding what actually we are different of. So maybe I would like to start from there. How do we find the best differences so that we can elevate our trade?
Ma'am, you mentioned about UPI. If you can elaborate on that, what kind of conversations you are having with the Indian side, because Singapore already has the payment system. And my second question is on the defense side. I mean, there were reports of you buying BrahMos. I mean, anything on that?
On UPI, the talk is between finance ministries and also central bank. Even during G20 ministerial meetings, there are bilateral talks also between them. I was not in the room, but there are discussion on that. And also, when Singapore is in the circle of UPI, and because Singapore also ASEAN member country, of course we are looking at how Singapore can be feel the benefit of UPI, and at the same time we need to also learn from Singapore because they have a more advanced system financially than Indonesia. Secondly, about defense, I think this is also another issue that I see at the same time related to trade and at the same time related to investment. So defense cooperation in terms of strategic weaponry or strategic products like ships or whatever. The biggest challenge for Indonesia is that the COVID-19 stops the process of the tender process, and then after that the finance for defense cooperation is lacking off because of COVID, and then after that post-COVID recovery, and now we are focusing on election. It's still on the table, but we need to see what will happen after October, because the cabinet now cannot decide on any strategic decision, because already we are entering a campaign next week. So we need to see until the new government.
Thank you, Ambassador, for a wonderful laydown. I have two questions. One is, you've laid out a consistent picture of the Indonesian foreign policy over 30 years. And on the other hand, you've also said that Indonesia, has a sort of a strategic autonomy similar to that of India. So I just wanted to understand the pushes and the pulls you've had to face in foreign policy, given the fractures of the world order currently, in the background, particularly of the two wars, one in Europe and the other in West Asia. The second question is, can you give us an update of the global maritime fulcrum strategy, particularly in the context of Indo-Pacific strategy? Thank you.
I will ask the global maritime fulcrum first. So my momentum to strengthen the defense cooperation is actually the global maritime fulcrum. So that is why we now have, for the first time, Admiral as defense attaché at the embassy, never before. That's also part of the global maritime fulcrum. The Navy talk now is the one that is one of the only, for now, only comprehensive talk, because from the minister to the chief to the until staff. So that also shows that the global maritime fulcrum, when we talk about bilateral relations between Indonesia and India, is in the implementation process already. Because you also, your policy, India's policy, Look East also help us. With the IPOI also help us, because then there is a merge between IPOI and AOIP of ASEAN. That means help and support the global maritime fulcrum of Joko Widodo. For push and pull, okay, for sure, the pull is domestic. You need to understand that Indonesia from, I think, the 50s, when we said Bandung Spirit and also NAM, non-aligned movement, it's basically as enshrined in our ideology, which is Pancasila. Number one is believe in God. So, and continue on. So, I think the pull is definitely the domestic, the ideology. We are the biggest Muslim country in the world. We are the biggest archipelagic state in the world. So those for sure pull factors of our foreign policy. The push, I believe, the interest of us cross-border. What happened in Europe, why President Joko Widodo visited Russia and Ukraine during the presidency, it's because to ensure that, look, don't do, how should I say, don't make G20 your playing ground. G20 is about something else, telling both like that. It's not a playing ground for geopolitical. It's about economy. Yes, economy is not in a vacuum, but if G20 is driven by some countries' interests, G20 will not work. The push also the cross-border of the commodity price. At that time, we suffer because one of the basic food of Indonesians are noodles. So the wheat comes from Ukraine. Now we find another source. But at that time, we panic. There is no noodles in the market. The supply is lacking. So, excuse me?
Saying that we switch to millets.
Oh yes. So you have to understand the push is cross-border, not political, more towards economy, more towards food security, energy security. That's the push. So whatever happens, that is why in my talk, I believe the Middle East or Gaza situation will, if it is escalating, then the problem is the food and energy security, not something that is about polarization of powers. For Indonesia, we are not included in the power polarization. We are active and free foreign policy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. My name is Keshav and I write for The Print. I have just one question. When you were talking about cooperation, you said in 2018 there was defense cooperation, then 2019 nothing. My follow-up question to that is on the Sabang port. It's been in negotiations for the better part of almost half a decade now. There has been reports of a master plan, but then, like you mentioned earlier, because of election season, no strategic decisions could be taken or may be taken on this. I just wanted to understand the status of Sabang port and where that lies in terms of the larger cooperation between India and Indonesia.
Okay. The fact that 50 of government officials coming to India, it's I think it's an evidence that something is happening. On Sabang Port, I have talked to the minister, a company, an investor, potential investor already visited. We try our best. We try our best to make it happen.
One is about the code of conduct in the South China Sea. You talked about India and Indonesia being gatekeepers in the Indo-Pacific. You also talked about differences within ASEAN, which make ASEAN stronger. So where exactly is the code of conduct stuck? And my second question is about Myanmar, because Myanmar has been seeing a lot of tensions, between the military and the different insurgent groups. What kind of role do you see for ASEAN in Myanmar now, in the present context?
If this is Chatham House rules, I will answer your question.
I'm an academic.
Yeah, but so on COC, I believe this is what Indonesia believes. Not only I believe. This is what we also said in G20. This is what we said in ASEAN. As long as we meet same table, same room, that's the potential of solution or light under the end, at the end of the tunnel. As long as the code of conduct is still on the table being discussed, and it's a hope that something, some sort of solution will happen. And I believe what is hampering is that you need to understand that even in ASEAN, 10 of ASEAN, how many are parties of the conflict of the South China Sea? No. And how many who said, we don't care because we don't have anything with South China Sea? Maybe later you can just find out. So it's all about differences in ASEAN. And you need to understand also, one country is landlocked, which is Laos. One country is an island state, which is Singapore. So differences of geographical situation or even the country itself makes it hard to negotiate the COC. And coming to one table and talking about it, it's also, foreign policy never focus, I think, this is my point of view, my personal, that should never be focused on the outcome, should focus on the process, for the effort, the process. The outcome may be not so much of a significance, but the process of it. That the COC for how many years already, but still people are trying to converge, pushing here, pushing there, pulling here, pulling. It's a hope in itself. So that's my answer for COC. For Myanmar, it's the same. I think ASEAN cannot do anything because the principle of non-intervention, we put it high up, because for us to tell a country already over and over, please take care of your own people. Now, how many refugees in our country, in Indonesia? Thousands. We never say no. But for Myanmar, they need to take care of themselves, and they need to commit to what they said. We never closed the door for economic cooperation. We never closed the door for humanitarian assistance. We never closed the door for anything but take care of the political situation there. It's not our job to deal with the internal process. They need to deal with internal process. Now, the internal faction inside Myanmar is so much because the government cannot just say, we want election, we want democracy. Just they need to decide on that.
My first question is regarding the Belt and Road Initiative. Ma'am, in India, we see BRI with a lot of concern. But in Indonesia, we can see that it is going on full scale. Recently, the high-speed railway was completed. So how does Indonesian government see the BRI project? And is there any realization of any security threat from the BRI? And my second question is that yesterday only, India surpassed the $4 trillion mark and became the fourth largest economy in the world. And Indonesia is projected to be the sixth largest economy by 2027. So do you see the countries in this region of the world, that is Indo-Pacific, playing a more active role on the global decision-making in the world?
I answered the second one first. 17th of November, my president gave remarks to the second Voice of Global South Summit. During that time, during the remarks, He mentioned about how emerging economies can play more significant roles. One, he said that we, the Global South, needs to ensure that we are not only market, we should be part of the global value chain. And we should not only export raw materials, we should be the factory of the world. That's what my president said. I think this factual fourth largest economy or fifth largest economy or thereof is to have it more development-based economy that needs to cater the current relevant progress. In the past, we only focus on how to get more devisa, more money from outside, but that is why we need to be part of the global value chain. And second, he said that emerging economies, developing countries are part of 2/3 of 193 UN members. We need to be loud in our voice. So I think his message is already very strong that in international organization or international fora in any kind, multilateral process, the Global South needs to be loud in voicing our needs and interests. That is why we agree on what India said, that the 4 golden years of G20, because this is the time to voice out what actually the interests and concern of emerging economies. On Belt and Road Initiative, I don't think we are part of the BRI. For the high-speed train, actually, if you read carefully, it's not, the budget is from our national budget, it's not from China. The technology, yes, but the budget is from our side, national budget. I think what we have done for the national development is because of the global maritime fulcrum more than any initiative of from foreign countries. That's what my answer would be.
Thank you, Madam, Your Excellency. It was very comprehensive talk, though I ran a bit late. And the rest was also, it was very big complimentary when Professor Pant also complimented and with different questions. So it has been all very, very comprehensive talk. Some of the things were already highlighted by some of the students. There are a few questions, very scintillating questions. First is that Myanmar issues that is impacting to everyone. And second important question that you have said that ASEAN doesn't have policy to intervene into internal politics, internal situation of a particular country. But see, Rohingya issue has been impacting altogether in all the ASEAN countries. So why there has been not any a very strong voice against Myanmar? That is, yesterday also, I think around 500 Rohingyas they landed in Aceh yesterday only. And it has also impacted us, and Bangladesh is already there. So why there has not been any strong voice against Myanmar? Second question is that you have said that we have recent increment around 4.6 or 6.8 and 8.1 million US dollar. Seeing the prospects, as you have said, the gateway of Indo-Pacific, and we are at a very specific strategic point located in India and Indonesia, and we have so much prospects. And do we have any target, like within 5 years we will achieve? Because still we see around 38.2 billion US dollar bilateral ties, and given the prospects, but still we have a lot of trade deficit between the two countries. So I think just if we talk about defense and you have palm oil industries, and little bit mine products, minerals. So all things, I don't think so that the trade in any day is going to increase in coming future. So what are the things in the pipeline?
Okay, I will start with the targets. Maybe it is wrong for me not to have a target, but 2 years taught me not to have a target. Because last year, who can predict the war in Europe? And this year, who can predict the anomaly of El Nino? So, what last year, one of my mission is to have sustainable certificate on sustainability on palm oil, so that Indonesia and India has similar certification or system, but it cannot happen because the price got very fluid. It's almost no one thinking about certificate of sustainability. So maybe I'm wrong not to have a target. That is why I said foreign policy must not focus only on the outcome, but needs to also focus on the process. So I remember in 2018, the leaders target 50 million US dollars for the trade. But again, the disruption are so bad that it's difficult now. It's very challenging to achieve that. About trade deficit, yes, I do acknowledge it. We have too much surplus, but to balance the trade itself is also a challenge, because how to balance a trade between two emerging economies that is now, because of global dynamics, is very inward, priority wise, right? So it's a challenge in the process. In the process, that's why my answer is that we need to find our differences rather than our similarities. No strong words against Myanmar. Are you sure? But
Impact.
making any impact or not making any impact, it's not ASEAN to decide. It's Myanmar to decide. Like I said, we cannot intervene and send our troops there. We are not UN. But the fact that they are not included in all high-level meetings of ASEAN, for example, I think it's strong enough, not by words, but by action.
Mm-hmm.
But should we stop the humanitarian assistance? Of course not. We still have humanity and humility in our foreign policy, right? So I think not inviting Myanmar in the highest level, political highest level meetings is even, I think, more stronger than words. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. I'm Angad. I'm a researcher at ORF. I just wanted to use the phrase your president used, that the global south needs to be loud. Now, in this context, very recently the European nations at WHO negotiations for the pandemic accord, they said that the TRIPS waivers is something that has to go to the WTO and not WHO. Now, I'm asking this question because Indonesia has been one of the foremost initiators of global health change. Do you see India as a partner in multilateral institutions where you can collaborate formally apart from backdoor negotiations?
I can say this: if we do not have a strong trust with India in multilateral fora, we will not swap our presidencies in G20. For sure. We will not approach or, how should I say, we will not give our best effort to ensure that the Prime Minister attend the East Asia Summit if we do not trust India in multilateral fora. And I can share with you my personal experience because in UN, this is Indonesia, and forever will be India next seat to Indonesia. So when we choose the election time, when India has no position, Indonesia has, and then India will say, which one do you choose? And if we don't have the position and they have, which one? So that's I think, shows that it's without a doubt, India is a friend in need.
But as strong voices of the global south, do you think this can be formalized in some way?
Formalize. I think Asian African Conference, Bandung Spirit, taught us, you know that Asian African Conference is not an organization, right? The organization is the non-aligned movement. But Asian African Conference define and decide the destiny of us all. So it need not be formalized in whatever organization may be, but it shows the voice is there, loud and clear. And also that's why G20 last year and this year also, if you see, this is what I talk to media about. Sidan knows about this. Also talk to Vion about this. I talk to many, but not the print. I'm sorry about this. I said the added value of India become G20 presidency is that what you raise, the issue that India raised in G20 is not about clouds or sky. No, it's about experience, which is UPI, women led development. It's all, maybe some people in India ignore. That's daily life. Why you put it in G20? But so much so that it's so strong that you can put in G20. Millet. It's not easy to sell millet. Do you know that? We don't know millet. I'm telling you the truth. It's not for joke. Indonesia doesn't know millet. We don't have millet. We don't have millet. But India being strong in their endeavors, they just keep banging the door and tell millet is the best. It will take some time to convince people that millet is the best. Like me, Indonesian, we don't know millet until you introduce us to millet. We don't have it in our country. Right, so the best thing about G20 India is not about the clouds in the sky, about paper, agreement of the leader. No, it's about what the grassroots show us. So that's the best about G20 India. The best about G20 Indonesia is that we have the fund for COVID pandemic. That's the best of it, because that's the first time ever G20 talks about cross-cut issues, which is finance, health, foreign policy, you name it. That's the best in Indonesia's presidency. We will need to see Brazil, because Brazil is another, they have ideas about sustainable living, but we need to see how they shape and create and shape G20 in the best that they could, based on what they have done and what the 24 give to global dynamics. Because 22 and 23 dynamics is crazy when you think about blue color, but the world gave us red, green, yellow, all together. And even the question of, will you have family photo, seems so difficult to be answered. That's 22.
Master, it has been a wonderful conversation. If I can just end it on a note which says, where if you can talk about, we are in a think tank, and I think many of us here are academics and students. What steps are being taken to enhance student-to-student connectivity, academic exchanges, and others? Because I think that's an area where we should be investing much more, both given our past and our present and our future. And are we doing enough there, or what more needs to be done there in that regard specifically? Because I think that's an important area of conversation.
I will say on camera that student-to-student conversation, hospital-to-hospital conversation dialogue is not complicated issues, but it is not easy to be implemented, because I'm telling you this, that is why my language for 75 years Indonesia-India relationship is building bridges past, present, and future, because Indonesians do not know what the future of India will be. If they know, they want to come to India. If they know, they will say, oh, so India is visioned maybe as one of the superpower of the world. They will come. Thirdly, Indonesians do not, maybe a small number of them, know, only small number of Indonesians know that Andaman Nicobar is only 1 hour flight from Aceh. So we need to ensure that people say India is a neighboring country of Indonesia. When I say that to people, they said, no, our neighboring countries are ASEAN and Australia. No. Add one more, India. Then maybe people will have interest on India and how our past define our future, how our struggle in colonial period define our relations, the present and the future, how we sit together in UN, how in 49, you are the only Asian country who helped us throughout the process of our independence, how our leaders flown to Odisha to save them. How? So, I think the voice of this kind of voice needs to be heard by more Indonesians, I believe. So that's why direct connectivity is important. Be creative in the program, like Sister Hospital is a program that we have since last year. It's not about sensitivity of pharma sector in our economy, but it's about Sister Hospital, how learning from between doctors. I managed to have 3 visits of doctors from Indonesia here and visits of hospital to Indonesia already. So this kind of story needs to be wrapped in more interesting and innovative way, I believe.
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Ambassador, for taking your time. And I hope that many of those here in the audience who work on Indonesia, who look and engage with Indonesia in different sectors, will be able to amplify that voice of both India and Indonesia's past as well as its future. So thank you again for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having
and thank
me.
you all for having me.